This episode of the Everything Matters podcast is brought to you by BeLegendary.coach, where we transform leaders into legends. Are you a senior leader, entrepreneur, or executive looking to take your leadership to the next level? Are you dealing with things such as imposter syndrome, concerns with whether or not your leadership is lingering long after you've completed face time? Looking for new and innovative ways to connect with your team and to gain buy-in from stakeholders that you deal with on a daily basis? If any of this sounds like something that you're dealing with and you would like to take your leadership to an extraordinary level, your effectiveness to a legendary level, visit BeLegendary.coach. That's www.belegendary.coach and schedule your free performance analysis today. Hello everyone, it's Bradford Speaks. Welcome back to the Everything Matters podcast. We're kicking off season 3. Been gone for a while, but we're back, coming back strong. This episode features the founder and CEO of Red Banyan. His name is Evan Nierman. Red Banyan is a global public relations firm that serves two types of clients. Number one, those who want to get into the press, and number two, those who want to get out of the press. Evan has 20 years of high-level experience in public relations, marketing, crisis management, online media, international relations, and public affairs. He provides strategic communications counsel to top business leaders, government officials, and presidential candidates and private individuals. Prior to forming Red Banyan, Mr. Nierman served as Director of Communications for a very fast-growing and highly scrutinized startup firm, where he represented the company and steered the CEO through important interviews with top-tier media, national and international media outlets. These skills that Mr. Nierman has developed over time have become quite coveted in the world that we find ourselves in of cancel culture. One wrong word in social media today in a post or a speech can cost someone their reputation or their entire career, in some cases their family. Evan supports individuals and brands in mitigating those risks and avoiding the cancer that cancel culture can become. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Evan Nierman, President and CEO of Red Banyan, to the Everything Matters podcast. Let's get it popping. Evan Nierman, man, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, the Everything Matters podcast. So wonderful to have you as my guest today. And we're going to be talking about a range of different topics. You know, Evan, I know you're a busy guy, and all of my guests here to come on here are really busy. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your day from sunny Florida to say hello to the Everything Matters podcast audience and share with us what you're up to, man. And I'm excited to talk about some of the topics that we're going to get into. So again, welcome, Evan.
Yeah, me too. Super excited. Glad to be here. Glad to talk with your loyal audience. Let's get into it.
Outstanding, man. Thank you. So, Evan, you know, first thing I like to do with my guests is, of course, giving people an opportunity to know who you are, right? I see you've got a lot of big logos back behind you. So, you know, you probably had some national attention, and some people may know who you are, and some people may not know who you are. But for those who don't know who you are, give us a sense of, you know, where you're from, where you currently reside now. You know, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, here's my short history. I was born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana, which is in Northwest Louisiana.
Oh.
Have you been to Shreveport?
Man, I went to Northwestern State in Natchitoches, man.
Oh, all right. Nice. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a Louisiana guy.
Louisiana connection. Cool.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
All right. So
that's awesome.
So then, you know, when you grow up in Louisiana, you got two choices. You either stay in Louisiana forever or you go as far away as you can. I went as far away as I could. So I moved to Washington, D.C. I went to school at George Washington University in D.C., studied communications. And after 4 years at school, I decided I was going to stay in Washington because, you know, D.C. is the center of the universe in many ways in terms of my interests in international politics and policy. So I stayed in D.C. Right. I worked for about 8 years in politics and policy immediately after school. Left that job, had a great experience there, mentored by this amazing woman who every year my annual review was, okay, what do I have to do to keep you here for one more year? What do you want to learn about that you're not learning about right now? What would you like exposure to? And so it just could not have been a better first job. Stayed there for about 8 years, which I know is a little unheard of in this modern era, but there was no reason to leave because I was learning. I left there because I realized I wanted a new challenge. And I realized that I was drawn to high stakes and crisis communications. So I went to work for a firm that did high stakes PR, and we had some celebrity clients, CEOs who got into trouble. We represented some foreign governments. I was actually kind of a one-man media operation for the government of Ethiopia for about a year and a half,
Okay.
which was super fascinating. Learned a ton about Ethiopia and Africa policy. Ultimately left DC because I had an opportunity to go in-house and work at a startup that had raised a lot of money. So
Gotcha.
they moved me to Florida. I moved to the Fort Lauderdale area, started at the startup, had an interesting ride there for about a year and a half, and then ultimately was like, okay, I've got this decision point. I was at that fork in the road, and it was either go back to Washington, where I knew that I could have a great career in DC and get a great job and work on interesting things, or,
Right.
and this is ultimately what I chose, I need to be my own man, be my own boss, take a risk. I felt like, having worked at a small communications firm, I liked the model. I liked the clients. I just thought that we did things the completely wrong way. And at the time, I had said to myself, one day if I have the chance, I'm going to do this the complete opposite of the way this company runs. And so
Yeah.
it was a terrible time to start a business. I had a 2-year-old and an infant. And looking back,
Oh my God.
I can't believe that I actually made the leap. But 12 years in, I'm certainly glad that I did. And so here I am. I live in Parkland, Florida, which no one used to know about. But then we had a mass shooting in our high school where my son goes to school and my daughter's going next year. So that really put Parkland on the map for all the wrong reasons. And our office is in Fort Lauderdale, and then we got offices all throughout the country in every time zone. So that's kind of the quick and dirty on me. And my firm is called Red Banyan. We have two main types of clients, those who want to get in the media and those who need to get out. So we do strategic communications work, but then we also do high stakes and crisis management.
Man, wide range of experience, and a guy from Louisiana, man, that's impressive. So let's go back a little bit. Like, you left, so you grew up in Shreveport. What high school did you go to? I'm just curious. I went to Northwestern with a few people from Shreveport. Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Caddo Magnet High School, which was the high school for nerds. So we didn't have a football team. We had a fencing team. And I was actually the captain of the soccer team. And believe it or not, soccer was the sport. We had an amazing principal who was from Spain, and she loved soccer. Okay. And so soccer was de facto the big sport at the school. But, it's a great school, really, academic focused, and just such a nice mix of students from everywhere, very diverse, very welcoming. It's I know we're going to get into the whole discussion around cancel culture later, but my high school experience and that kind of academic experience was really a picture of what should be at a school. People with different backgrounds, different viewpoints, but all coexisting relatively peacefully. And it was really a great place to go to school.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, and that is something that I'd love to get more into, because as we know now, because of all the, righteousness, if you will, and people who can't respect one another's opinions is causing a lot of mayhem across the country and even across the world. So when you left Caddo Magnet, it sounds like you might have had other options to go. I mean, you got Tulane down in New Orleans. You got, there's several schools in Louisiana. And like you said, you stay in Louisiana, which I got a lot of friends who did stay there and are still there, or you leave and go far away. So why Washington University?
Yeah, well, my father had gone to Tulane. My brother ended up doing his graduate work at Tulane, and I actually did a semester at Tulane too one summer. So I don't mean to diss Louisiana overall, and there are plenty of good schools, such as your alma mater, where you can get a great education. But for me, I was passionate about politics. I was passionate about international affairs, and I felt like I wanted to be where the action was, and I wanted to be at the center of things. And I felt like while I had an unbelievably great childhood in Shreveport, wouldn't have changed a thing. It was really an excellent place. I was there. I grew up with my brothers, and I had 3 first cousins who also lived there. So we were kind of like 6 boys all together, and my grandparents lived there. Right. I just needed to see what else was out there in the world. I wasn't willing to say, I want to stay in Louisiana. And in DC, I really only applied to schools in Boston and DC. And I'll tell you, George Washington was not my first choice, but I didn't have to write an essay. All I had needed to do was submit a few writing samples, and I had a bunch of writing samples. And also, when I went up there, the coach committed to bring me in to preseason for soccer. And so I was super
Okay.
fixated on wanting to play college soccer. And so it was an
Nice.
easy application. They brought me in for preseason. Ultimately, I was able to earn a scholarship. And also, I got academic
Oh,
scholarship to GW. So for all those reasons, and they had a good communications program, and they were in downtown DC, it just seemed
oh
like the
man.
right move.
Yeah, for a young 18-year-old kid, man, coming out of Shreveport, Louisiana, being in the middle of everything political on a global scale is pretty awesome, I would say, pretty interesting. So at what point did you and I've always been curious of people that are like in high school or, the 10th grade, 11th grade. I had a few friends that I went to school with and grew up with that ended up going to law school and ended up getting into politics. At what point did you become, because I had no interest ever being around politics. It always was a big turnoff to me. What was it about politics that drew you in? And then what point did you become interested in being involved in policy at all?
Well, that really, I think I'd have to credit my grandfather, who is
Okay.
my biggest inspiration and influence. And I grew up in Shreveport with him. He was a child of the Depression. His mother actually died at childbirth. And so he was
Oh,
raised
wow.
in an orphanage. He
Mm,
lived for a time with his sister and her husband, but they couldn't take care of him because they couldn't afford to keep him. So they put him in an orphanage. He was
mm.
raised by nuns. And ultimately, he got a scholarship
Wow.
to Georgetown University. And he went, and he actually never finished because he got drafted and he went to go fight in World War
Mm,
II. But my grandfather
gotcha.
was a very patriotic guy. And when he came back from the war, he became a stockbroker and he invested. And really, what he believed in was this country and the ability of, with hard work and dedication, this is still a land of
Mm,
opportunity. And so he built the kind of life that he'd only dreamed of when he was growing up in that orphanage. And he took each of
yeah.
his grandsons on a trip to Washington, D.C. when we were around 10 or 11 years old. And so he took us there. We saw the monuments. We went to the museums, and he just sort of waxed nostalgic about his time in DC and just really tried to
Yeah.
impart to us, you have to understand you are lucky to live in this country, and you have
Mm,
to appreciate all of the opportunities that we have as Americans that they don't necessarily have in other parts of the country or other parts of the world rather. And so for me,
yeah.
my love affair with Washington, I think, started with that trip to DC with my grandfather and my grandmother when I was 10 or 11 years old. And so I was attracted to wanting to be back in
Yeah.
Washington and wanting to be at the center of the universe in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No doubt, man. No doubt. As you were talking, Evan, I'm thinking about so your communications major, how did were you like a double major, communications and political science, or how did these two worlds sort of collide for you, the communications piece and getting into politics and policy? How'd that happen?
I was not a double major. It was just a straight communications degree. And I didn't
Okay.
really know when I went to school exactly what I would do, but I figured it would be something in the realm of communications. I'd always been interested in English and language arts, and I was always a writer. And so
Mm,
communications was a good, broad, catch all kind of major.
right.
And I figured it's going to apply to pretty much anything. And so when I was looking to graduate, when I was graduating, I still at that point didn't even know exactly where I was going to go. But the cool thing about going to
Mhm.
school at GW was we didn't really have classes on Fridays. And they did that on
Oh,
purpose. They would load up your schedule Monday to Thursday. The only exception was if you studied a foreign language, you had to do go into the language lab for Friday mornings, which I
gotcha.
did have to do. But for the most part, you had Fridays completely available. And the reason was they wanted to encourage the students to take advantage of being in Washington and to go get internships. So by the time
Yeah.
I got to my senior year, I'd already had 4 or 5 different internships. And internships are great, not just for figuring out what you want to do, but for knowing what you don't want to do. And I had some
Yeah.
bad internships. And so I knew, I'm a big believer that you learn more from the mistakes or you learn more from things that didn't go well than
Sure.
the things that worked out. So I knew what I didn't want to do, and I wasn't sure
Right.
exactly what I wanted to do, but I had a great internship. And I was shocked. One day I was at my internship, which ended up being my first job, and my boss she
Yeah.
said to me, she goes, well, what are your plans post-graduation? And I said, I'm going to graduate in about 6 weeks. I have no idea. I guess I'm going to start applying for jobs. And she goes, well, don't do that. You've got a place here. So
Nice.
just plan to come here. And I said, oh, okay, that sounds great. Now, about 6 weeks later, I was due to show up for my first day of work in a couple of days. And I said to her, can we talk for a moment? And she's like, yes. I was like, I just want to understand, I have a job here, right? And she's like, yes, I told you have a job. I was like, am I getting paid? Are there benefits? How does that work?
Right. Yeah, how's that all that work? Yeah, exactly.
And she goes, oh, okay, it's real clear. You're going to start, your salary is $26,000. I would never pay more than that for someone right out of school. You have a $26,000 salary. We have dental and we have health insurance. And after you've been here for a year, you get to contribute to the retirement plan. Any other questions? And I was like, that sounds great. Wow. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, Evan, hold on a second. Hold on. I got a question. Hold on. So I don't want to, you may not want people to know your age, but I'm thinking about like what my first salary was too, coming out of college, right? And 26,000 sounds insane today, right? What year was this you were getting offered 26 grand? And it may be the industry, I don't know, because I'm a communications major too. And when I was interning at KLAX, you may remember in Alexandria, KLAX, right now in Alexandria, right?
Sure.
And they offered me a job when I did my internship, much like you. They offered me a job and they said, yeah, well, we'll pay you. I think it was $18,000 a year. And I was like, and again, I'm 21. I'm like, okay, I guess that's good. I didn't really have a sense of what was good, what was not. And then I went and divided that by 12. I'm like, wait, hold on a second. That's only like, and I was like, that's only this much a month. Like, yeah. That's how you start off. You got to earn your way through. And I was like, so I'm curious, $26,000 a year. What year was this? They were offering me 26 grand.
This is the year 2000.
Wow.
So 23 years ago. And I got to tell you, it's a lot more expensive to live in Washington, D.C. than it is to live in Alexandria, Louisiana. I can promise you that.
Indeed. No doubt about it.
That's okay.
Oh, my God. That's crazy.
I lived in an apartment with my best friend. We were roommates. I remember we'd make dinner off the George Foreman grill, and we'd make a lot of spaghetti. And you know what? Yeah. I felt like I was the richest guy in the world. I didn't care. And I really believe, and a lot of people reach out to me, and I don't care, by the way, if people know how old I am. I'm 44. So,
okay.
But I think the 40s are better than the 30s. The 30s were better than the 20s. So, when I talk to
the 50s are better than the 40s, man.
All right. Well, I look forward to it. I hope I make it there.
Absolutely.
I'm planning on it.
Yes. Yes. It's a blessing, man. Hang in there. I know you got kids too. That's a big important thing to be there for them too. So you can be around for grandkids like I am and all that good stuff, man. Beautiful.
Nice.
So let's take a turn. One of the things that you have written a book about and are adamant about, and I'm sure being around policy, being in DC, around media. Also, one of the things you mentioned earlier that I found interesting, you said that your firm works with people who are looking to get into media or who need, you didn't say want to get out, you said need to get out.
That's right.
Talk to me about that for just a minute. Like, why would someone need to get out of media? What does that mean?
Well, there's this misperception out there that all press is good press. And that took hold many years ago, and people repeat that mantra. And people say to me all the time, don't you believe all press is good press? And I would say, absolutely not. That's not the case. So if you don't believe me, you could talk to some of our past clients, and you could ask the Christian performer who got caught sending naked pictures of himself to his girlfriends and lost his record contract. And you'd say, well, is all press good press? You could talk to the company that they had an unregistered sex offender who they didn't know, who was in a senior executive leadership, and he got arrested in the office, frog marched out of there, and half the staff quit on the spot. And then they started blogging about it. Would they agree that all press is good press? No, I don't think so. Small and medium-sized businesses that are facing horrible comments online, Glassdoor reviews that are not based on the truth, but they're from embittered former employees who lost their jobs, not because any sort of nefarious reasons on part of the employer, but just because they weren't the right fit or they didn't do a good job. Is that press good press? Or bad reviews, one-star reviews by your competitors that are trying to make you look bad online? Is that good press? No, it's not. And
Yeah.
so for me, I was drawn to high stakes and crisis PR because I saw
Mm.
firsthand in DC the way sometimes good people and great organizations would find themselves under fire and being criticized unfairly.
Yeah.
And I wanted to
Yeah.
be in a role where I could be of service to them and help them and guide them through a really tumultuous time. And so that was the why, to press the truth,
Gotcha.
fight for the truth, and to help good people and good organizations that sometimes get into complicated situations.
Yeah. Really great, man. And this sort of takes me in a different direction because it's like, yeah, I totally get that. And I'm all for people who are good people who just got bitter employee, whatever it might be, that can really tarnish their reputation and have a huge impact on them financially, right, as an organization or whatever they're doing. I also start to think about, as you mentioned, that people who actually are not good people, because when you said need to get out of media, I'm thinking that these are people that have a career in media and need to get out. Where you're talking about are people who have negative media out there and they want to get out of the media. They want to change the narrative, right? So what about people, and being in DC, I'm not a big fan, to be honest with you, of DC. And you probably know why, especially
Most
considering
people are not. That's why the approval
know,
ratings for Congress are in the toilet.
exactly. So, the corruption is bad. So what about people, and whether or not your firm has worked with people, maybe firms who've worked with people who we all know are corrupt, but then you have PR firms and companies that come up and do the cleanup work behind these people to shift the narrative to make them look good when honestly they don't deserve it. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I love that you're challenging me with a good, tough question, and it is.
Yeah.
It's an important question. So I think people have to decide where the bright line in the sand is for them. And I'm of the opinion that most people are good people. I come at things with a glass half full approach. Does that mean that everybody is? Absolutely not. Are there bad people out there who really get what they deserve? Their comeuppance? I think that's also true. And for me, one of the biggest challenges is a crisis situation, it moves so fast. And with a 24-hour news cycle and the way the media is looking for a scoop and the acceleration of a story through social media, it is like a lightning flash. You can have 20, 30 years of your career and good deeds undone in 30 minutes online if the story breaks, etc. It is that fast. And so one of the challenges is when the phone rings over here at Red Banyan and we have someone on the line who is telling us, look, here's the scenario. I need help. This is the situation I'm facing. I've been doing this a long time. And so I've gotten better at sussing out who's legit, who really, and what I try to do, and I have a responsibility to my team, and also I feel like a responsibility to the public, is I need to decide when I'm talking to these people and really probe and ask a lot of really tough questions. Because when I'm talking to them, I'm trying to understand, is this someone who either is under fire based on misinformation or disinformation and they don't deserve to be? Is it someone who legitimately did actually make a mistake, but they want to make things right and they feel bad, they want to atone? Versus every once in a while you'll talk to someone and they're trying to hire a PR firm to do, clean up or get a spin doctor, and they're not actually regretful of the fact that they did the bad thing. They're regretful that they got caught. And so I have to say no sometimes. If I get the sense that someone is trying to simply use my team in order to clean up an image, but they don't actually want to accept responsibility for what they've done. And I'll just tell you, for me as a business owner, core values are at the heart of everything that my company does. And one of our core values is accountability. And so if I'm talking to someone and I don't get a sense that they have a real sense of accountability, then I choose not to work with them. Now, I don't judge other firms that choose to work with whomever comes in the door. I think that's their right. I think that's their prerogative. And I try not to, I don't stand in someone else's shoes, and I don't try to put myself on a higher moral plane than anybody else. So I don't judge them. And I do think there is legitimacy. Defense attorneys are a great example. They represent people who they have to assume in a lot of cases Their person did it, but that
Yeah.
person is entitled to fair representation under the law. Now,
Right.
I don't believe that every single person, I do believe that everyone's entitled to legal representation because that's what our system provides.
Right.
Is everybody also entitled to PR representation? Well, probably yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're entitled to PR representation from me or my company.
Right.
And so
Right.
I've said no. I've said no to people who I thought were sort of playing me. I've said no to people who I felt were actually bad people and they didn't want to take accountability for what they'd done, and they were trying to obscure the truth and hide the facts. I say no to people if I think they're not going to be honest with my team,
Right.
and ones who are, I feel like, are lying, because when we deal with the press all the time, and our credibility is everything. And anyone
Right.
who's ever worked for me, with me, etc., knows that we don't lie to reporters. Period. Full stop. I don't believe in
Right.
that. I think it's unethical. And so, PR people sometimes get a bad reputation. Oh, they'll lie, they'll say anything.
Right.
And
Right.
that's just not how we roll around here. And so again, it's a challenge because not everybody who I've represented, I believe in their views. Not everybody I've represented, I feel, like they've gotten in trouble in many cases for bad things. But there's almost always more to the story. There's more context. And I think people need to pause a beat before they're so quick to condemn their fellow man, fellow woman.
Yeah. 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 Totally, man. Totally couldn't agree more. I want to sort of touch on something that I think is important, and just love to get your view on it. Being that we both grew up in Louisiana, you're a little bit younger than I am, and I don't know what it was like there in Shreveport. I grew up in the 80s, mostly 70s, 80s, right? And there was a lot of division. The thing about it was like race division, right? Black, white. There's a lot of black, white. We didn't have a lot of other nationalities and ethnicities in my hometown, very small hometown. And there was a clear division between blacks and whites. And it wasn't, it was weird though, because it was like, it's like they say a fish doesn't realize it's in water. It's just, it's its normal environment. And I tell this story all the time, but when I came to Northwestern to go to school, was talking to some of my teammates there and dorm mates, and we were talking about our senior proms. And I said something like, yeah, man, well, at the white prom, they did this. And at the black prom, it was a little bit different. We did it like this. And they were like, no, wait, hold on a second, bro. Did you say black and white prom? Y'all had separate proms, dude? And I'm like, yeah, y'all didn't? No, man, are you kidding me, dude? It's almost 1990, like separate proms. And it all of a sudden dawned on me that not everybody's experience was like mine, which was weird to me because I thought everybody had separate proms. So growing up in Louisiana, and I'm going this way because I want to touch on something that I know for the black community is something that's of interest. And I would just be curious to hear your point of view. Like, sure. I was talking to a cousin of mine last night who lives here in Georgia, and it was his birthday weekend. So that's why my weekend was so great this weekekend. I got my cousin and my sisters were here.
Happy birthday.
And, appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Well, it's his birthday. He turned 55, not me yet. But we were celebrating with him. So he's a 30-year Army vet, right? And, he's supposed to support his commander in chief. And it was interesting. We got into this heated debate, all love, but it was a heated debate about Trump. So, he said, do you think Trump's racist? I said, I don't know. I don't know this guy. Well, you can hear the things that he says. He's racist. I'm like, so I guess from your point of view, when you think about some of the things, because I've heard some things he said, and it could be taken a couple of different ways. How does a PR firm work with someone like Trump, who can be very this off the cuff and say things, and also with deep fake technology, sometimes you don't know if it's even him talking. Like, you don't even know sometimes, and I know people may not know that this stuff exists, but we don't know a lot of times what we're listening to on the media. It's not 100%, factual. How would you represent someone like a Trump if he was one of your clients over at Red Banyan?
Oh man, so much to dive into in that one question. So first of all, we did not have separate proms at my school, and actually, I don't know of any other schools in Shreveport that were doing separate But I think your
We were a
assessment,
unicorn, apparently.
yeah, but it's interesting because I went to magnet schools, all three.
Huh?
And so the magnet schools had brought kids from all different parts of the city. And so
Mm,
I always went to school, and it was close to 50-50 white and black
mm.
together. And
Wow.
what's interesting about my childhood and in Louisiana was I always had black friends. I always had black classmates.
Right.
And while there was division in the city and kind of all the black
Yep.
kids lived in one area, the white kids tended
Right.
to live in another, you didn't have a lot of intermingling. There weren't white families in the black neighborhoods and vice versa.
Right. Exactly.
People assume, especially when I went to DC, that there was some sort of animosity and hatred between the
Mm,
groups. And my experience growing up was there was a separation and almost, and maybe it was a byproduct of the era that we had just come from, but there
right.
wasn't necessarily open hostility. It was more just,
Right.
these folks go here, these folks go there. We all, but
Right.
at my school, my experience was always that everybody was commingled, and I grew up, my schools were in neighborhoods that were predominantly black. But
Mm,
I never really thought much of it. And it never
yeah.
really occurred to me that we were supposed to be divided. I honestly, I think one of the biggest moments where I actually realized this division that I'd been somewhat blind to was when they
Hmm.
showed in the classrooms in high school. They stopped teaching and they put on the OJ trial because they were reading the verdict.
Mm,
And they
hmm.
read the
Hmm.
verdict. They had these TV monitors or these in our classrooms where we would watch Channel One, which was this brief newscast at the beginning of the day. So they stopped teaching and they put on the OJ verdict. And when they read the verdict,
Hmm.
the white students were groaning and the black students were clapping and celebrating. And
Yeah.
in that
Isn't that crazy?
moment,
Yeah.
I realized, wow, there's just a total difference here in viewpoint.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, I think when you're talking about Donald Trump, this whole question of is he a racist? Is he not a racist? I tend to fall more where you are. Like, I don't know him.
Yeah.
I've never met him. Do I think that he thinks he's a racist? No, I think he thinks that he's not. And if you want to
Yeah.
take him at his word, which is a big leap because he says a lot of stuff that is, you know, I really do think he believes some of the things that he says that are frankly unbelievable and factually inaccurate. I think he convinces himself sometimes of things that are
Yeah.
completely false, but he somehow gaslights himself. Uh, I don't know what's in his heart. I don't know.
Right.
He certainly
Exactly.
says things that I personally find deeply offensive. And I can certainly understand someone looking at his rhetoric and believing him to be
Sure.
a racist. You never really know with people, though, and I do think in the same way that we were talking about, you judge someone by a lifetime of action.
Right.
I think it's up to each person to look at who he is, what he's done, and they can make a
Right.
determination. But I also think it's largely immaterial because one, he's not our president right now, and
Mm.
which I understand he may be. It's actually a possibility, which is mind blowing that after everything that he could be the Republican nominee again, which is fascinating. But to your question, how would I deal with Trump as a client? The answer is I wouldn't, because I wouldn't
Mm.
I wouldn't I would. Here's the challenge: when you're a consultant, you're being engaged by someone to provide your best analysis. You're giving
Mm.
them your advice, and it's based on experience and judgment and qualifications. And there's nothing more demoralizing than feeling like you can help someone and then having them completely ignore you or not take your advice. I don't actually think that he would make a very good client at all, because I think
Mm.
he would not take any sort of guidance. He's an individual who clearly thinks he knows better than everybody on pretty much any topic. And so, if he doesn't listen to his advisors in the White House, and he doesn't listen to a chief of staff or what anybody else is telling him, to me, it doesn't seem like a good use of my time or my team's time to provide a lot of
Yeah.
advice to someone. And so, in the past, actually, we've actually said goodbye to certain clients because they weren't taking our counsel. And it's a fine line. On the one hand, you want to provide counsel, and our job is to provide our assessment and our recommendations and to help people. And if they choose to go a different way, that's fine. Our job is to lead the horse to water, not to force it to drink. But in the handful of circumstances where we've actually let clients go, it's typically their lawyer who's blocking us, and where we get into a situation where we're recommending and seeing a very clear path for how they can get the outcome they want, but they're not willing to take it. And so eventually it just becomes a waste of time and effort if you're trying to, what the recipe is that's going to end up with the best possible outcome, and they're just not listening. So at a certain point, you just have to say, look, I just think we're not meant to be together.
Yeah.
That's what I would say
about
that.
It's like breaking up with a girlfriend, huh? You know what? This just isn't working out. This is not going to work out. It's interesting.
I don't hate you. It's just not. It was good. All was good, and we gotta move on.
Right. Exactly. When you were talking about what it was like for you, kind of going back to growing up at Shreveport, it was very much the same for us. Like at school, we all got along fine. Like we played ball together. We were, we even hung out. I had a lot of white friends. We hung out together, went to parties together. And my senior trip, I went with John Sharp, one of my best buddies. We drove to Florida together for our senior trip. And so the kids didn't have an issue with it per se, but I think it was more the adults. And I think you're right. I think it was the era that they came from that was just kind of cast down on us, and people went to their respective communities, played in their respective leagues or whatever they did. But at school, we all got along fine. It was not a lot of dissension division between us. So just wanted to kind of put a top on that. All right, Evan, man, I want to get into this. The meat of the conversation here is I think is a huge and monumental topic to talk about. And I don't know if we'll tackle it all in this one particular podcast. It's cancel culture. And man, you could say one thing today, and I can see why a company like Red Banyan would be so valuable to people, that do what you do, because man, you can say one wrong sentence and the thing about it is it may not even be wrong, but if the right person amplifies what you say, your career could be over. Like literally overnight. So I want to talk about what is, for the people that may not, I know we've heard this term before, but I would love to get like a definition from you. Like, what is cancel culture? What is it?
Yeah, cancel culture is activity by a mob to isolate and unfairly punish someone who they believe has committed a transgression. So in essence, what you're talking about is trial and execution by mob. And, and part of our research in putting together this book, The Cancel Culture Curse, was to identify the 6 elements that you can see when you look at a cancel culture instance. And I'll quickly run through those because I think this is fundamental to understanding what is cancel culture. You can remember it with the acronym CONDEMN, CANDEM. So the C is that there's a crime that's committed against a collective. It's not just a person-to-person dispute, it's against a collective. So for instance, if you and I get into an argument, it's not just that, Bradford and Evan disagreed. It's that, well, maybe maybe I said something rude to you. Well, it was an attack, not on you as a man, but it was an attack on you as a black man. So all of a sudden it's I've come after a collective. The A is that it arises and accelerates quickly. So all of a sudden something happens, and to your point, boom, the match is lit, the explosion goes off. The N, the nature of the offense is either fabricated or it's actually minor. So, say you and I were arguing over, I like the Cowboys, you like the Saints. And I said, man, you are so stupid. And all of a sudden it starts this thing. Well, Evan just made this remark, and he basically said that, he thinks this collective is stupid. He thinks there's a superior. So all of a sudden the nature of what I said, I actually was, saying to you, oh man, you're stupid. No way. There's no way the Saints are better. And all of a sudden it gets completely taken out of context and blown out of proportion. So the D is it prompts a disproportionate response. So not, if it happens on this podcast and then your listeners hear it and they go, oh my gosh, this guy, Evan, we got to take him out. We got to figure out who his clients are, and we got to try to contact all of them and tell them, you don't want to work with this guy. He's a racist. So you gotta end him. So all of a sudden it's a disproportionate response. The E is that everyone is afraid to get involved. So what happens is this mob of people, I refer to them in the book as cancel vultures, because they like to swoop down and pick apart other people and then leave them for dead and fly off to their next meal. Everyone's afraid to back me up, because what they don't want is the mob coming after them. They don't want all these people on Twitter, these strangers, getting involved. Oh, you're defending Evan? That must mean you think that what he said is okay. So let's start looking at this person. And then the last element, which is the M, is the moral absolutism of the people doing the canceling. So if someone decides that they're going to cancel someone else, they think that they have the righteousness on their side. They got religion. They're on the side of the angels. Therefore, whatever they do to someone is warranted, because it's either it's good because the person's a bad person who deserves it, or it's good because it's good for society writ large to punish someone so reprehensible. So when you look at those elements, when you start looking at instances of cancel culture, you'll see them arising again and again and again. And if you want to know, is a scenario cancel culture or not, run it through that CONDEMN framework, and then you'll have your answer. If 5 or 6 of those elements are there, that is a cancel culture attack, and you should treat it as such. And if you've only got a couple of them, well, the person may be in crisis, but it's not necessarily cancel culture.
Man, that's deep. I mean, I love the breakdown right there on that. I like that acronym. Really, really powerful. So in your research that you've done in writing the book, how does the mob form? Like, how do you get someone says something or does something? And, like when you think about it in real life, right? If Evan says something, Bradford may agree, but I mean, I may not be able to get 5,000 people behind me that agree that Evan's wrong. How does this mob get formed? Like, how do all these people come together and just pounce on this one individual as a vulture?
Well, say you and I got into that argument we were talking about, where we were fighting over a super serious issue, like, who's better, the Saints or the Cowboys? And I made my absolutely abhorrent remark when I said, man, you're stupid. The Cowboys are better. Okay. And that prompted then this eruption. So if it had been the 90s and we'd been where we were, okay, so then you'd have to tell people one-on-one, oh, Evan said this thing about me. It was so frustrating. Okay, we live in an era where everybody on the planet can be connected to every other person who has an internet connection. So we've got these devices in our pockets with us at all times. We take pictures, we take videos, we go and we post. So all you need is an internet connection, and there's a limitless number of people with whom you can connect. And now, in the era of social media, where you've got millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people congregating, it's actually very easy to stir up a mob. So, if you look at horrible times in this country where mob violence was enacted, lynch mobs in the South, back in the era of cowboys and Indians, where you'd have a posse get together. And so you have these there. It was word of mouth, but it was fairly limited. You need to ride through the town on your horse and be like, hey, we got this situation. Who's with me? In this era, it's actually super simple. You send out a call for support online. You go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, you pick the social platform. It doesn't really matter, but it's quite simple to find a critical mass of people who are ready to take action. And there's a lot of folks who've spent their whole life being relatively powerless. They've never really had a chance to take somebody down, but there's a feeling and a sense of satisfaction. If you feel like you are a social justice warrior and you can do something and you can make your voice heard, it's a powerful intoxicant. The problem is many times people launch into this and they don't actually have the facts. They don't know the information, and they go after someone and they target them and they ruin them without even having all the information. And I think a lot of people don't understand there's a real human being on the other side of that act. And so that's part of the reason that my co-author and I wrote this book, is because we wanted, here we do crisis communications. We counsel good people all the time in bad situations. And we saw firsthand how people's entire lives were ruined by cancel culture. instances where people made mistakes, but also instances where they weren't guilty at all. It was a miscommunication or it was misidentification where someone had the wrong person, and all of a sudden their business is teetering on the brink of destruction. And we actually had clients who they literally almost lost their lives because people came to actually kill them, showed up at their home with weapons to kill them based on a lie.
Wow. That's incredible. Unbelievable, man. That's scary. And one
scary.
of the other things that is, as you were talking, I was thinking, and I figure social media and the internet has a big part to play in cancel culture and how you can spread this kind of virus, if you will, so quickly. And I was thinking about also, all it takes is you may not even need this, but if you had one influencer with 1 million followers say one thing, all of a sudden it's lit like a candle on a flame, and it's just gone, right? And not that you need that, but when you have that, it just goes that much faster. One person says something and everybody hops on and says, yeah, that's wrong. That's wrong. So, Evan, where do we go, man? I mean, this obviously is it can be very detrimental to someone's life, someone's livelihood. What is the answer for this? How do we curtail this? How do we end this cancel culture? Because as I watch this happen on a daily basis, and I know you're probably seeing it even more frequently than I am. What's the answer? How do we get ourselves out of this quagmire we're in?
And that's a great question. And to answer that, that's exactly why we wrote this book, was because we believe that we need to both define it and expose it, and then we can defeat it. And that's really the ultimate goal here. And there's a lot of information in the book about how people can both avoid getting into a scenario in the first place. What are some very specific things that they can do in order to limit the likelihood that they will be canceled? But then we also have an entire chapter in the book that's basically a playbook explaining, if you do come under fire, what should you do? What should you not do? How do you avoid making it worse, etc.? Right. And you make a great point when you say all it takes is one influencer with 1 million followers. Yes, an influencer can accelerate this so much. Also, when you get that crossover between what exists as a controversy in social media and then it moves across that chasm into the mainstream press, because all of the reporters from mainstream press, they live online too, and they're monitoring, trolling around on Twitter all day looking for what's breaking. So then all of a sudden, when you have that compounding effect of a social media scandal, and then the media jumps on it and then amplifies it, it's like a snowball rolling down a mountainside, and it becomes this avalanche very, very quickly. So there's a lot of things that people can do. They don't necessarily have to sit back and allow this cancel culture to take them out. It doesn't need to be a death sentence. And I think one of the main things is a mentality shift, a mindset. If someone is being canceled, especially for something that they don't deserve to be canceled for, and I would argue people pretty much, you'd be very hard pressed to find someone who deserves to be permanently ruined based on what they say. And I say that even with knowing that there are some people out there who say and do horrible things. They're inveterate racists, misogynists, hateful people. But also, look at all the instances where there are people like that who then get educated and they are actually able to see the errors of their ways, and they can become something that they weren't. And I do believe that there is what cancel culture does is it obliterates the possibility of someone ever being able to redeem themselves. It makes all mistakes permanent. People can no longer just make a mistake and learn from it and grow. It's their life is destroyed. And especially when that happens to young people, college kids even younger than that, that is a scary thing. And so in terms of what can we do, I think parents have a key role to play here, because we need to educate our kids, one, the threat that exists and the risks of having your whole world that can be documented. You can be in the wrong place at the wrong time, show up in a picture, and there's something illegal happening. All of a sudden, your kid is in the midst of a very dangerous situation. But also teaching our kids that they also shouldn't participate in this. And not only should they try to do things to avoid being canceled, but that it's not okay for them to be taking people out. We spend a lot of time talking about cyberbullying and bullying, and that's become a big thing in this country. Well, not all bullying is cancel culture, but all cancel culture is bullying. And so we can teach our kids not to participate in that and remind them about how would you feel if the shoe were on the other foot, and that they shouldn't participate in this. It's not, mob justice is not justice.
Man, I agree. One of the other things I see and you're sort of pointing to it, is what's impacted also is the freedom of speech. Because if someone has to, you're consulting a client and it's like you're telling them, okay, here's how we're going to do this, and here's what you probably need to say in the next press conference. Like you're molding that speech, and what that's doing is, when someone has to tiptoe and step around everything they say because they're afraid they're going to make a mistake and say something wrong, all you're doing is quelling free speech. People should be free to say what they want to say, And, I don't know if I told you this, but, I'm a coach. So I coach people in high performance coaching. And one of the things that I work with people around is, okay, well, what do you make it mean? What do you say to yourself about that? And I think that the education piece that you're talking about is so important for parents, is to work with their kids. And the parenting thing is, because I think it's going to take more than parents, right? Because we got a large majority of families and kids that don't have parents or being raised by grandparents. So it's really a community activism event that needs to happen. We all need to get together and get behind our youth to support them all, no matter if they're your family or not, right? But, when people say these things, people should be able to say what they want to say. The N word is one of those words, and it's something that I grew up hearing, and it's not an uncommon thing. You hear it all the time, and some people it's okay to say it. Some people it's not okay to say it. If we could eradicate the word, that'd be great. That's not going to happen. So what you can do as a person, if you're called something like that, if you're called a honky or a cracker or a nigger or whatever it might be, and using these words, it's like it's like, what are you saying to yourself about what's being said to you? Is it true? Ask yourself, is it true? Right? And you can actually navigate from that point and say, hey, you know what? It's just a word. He said it. I'm making it mean something, and it's having an impact for me. But really, the word itself has no inherent meaning. Really. That's the reality of it. But like you said, it's a mindset shift. How do you get someone to change their mindset and actually have the word just be letters on a piece of paper? They don't mean anything. Because it does have, and I don't want to negate, right, the impact of those types of words on society, and I get it. So I don't want anybody to cancel me saying, well, Bradford's being insensitive. No, I get it. At the same time, we have to be individually responsible for what we take on and what we make it mean, and how it actually impacts multiple people going forward. So I love that.
The cancel vultures that are listening right now, if there are any, I hope not, right. But now they're going to jump on this. They're going to say, look, Bradford is advocating the use of the N-word. That's what just happened here. And so all of a sudden, you're a racist. And not only that, you actually said the word out loud. I heard you say it. And you used a couple of other epithets toward a guest. And of course you didn't use them. You didn't use them towards me, but that's how quickly. So like, even the fact that you said those words put you at risk. And I think one of the things we do talk about in the book is, and the use of the N word specifically, and words, there are instances where people have been canceled just for saying the word. Like, for instance, there's a professor who was teaching a class explaining why, the power of words and how these are terrible words and they should never be used. Yeah. And the fact that he just said the word out loud, it prompted a complaint, and the guy lost his job. Wow. He was actually, it's the complete inverse of what was happening. I don't think, do we really want to live in a world where, there were some instances where kids, high school kids, who used that word in the context of singing rap lyrics. So songs that are on Spotify, they're on Apple Music, they're streamed, they're monetized, they're out there in the public, they sing along with the lyrics, someone has them on video doing it, and all of a sudden they ruin their lives. Does that seem like a reasonable outcome? And I tell the story in the book, which is a shocking example. So a girl who happens to be white uses the N-word in a silly context. It's not like she was, look, that word is terrible. You shouldn't use it towards anyone. I'm not endorsing it. So all the cancel vultures, I'm not endorsing it either. That was Bradford. That wasn't me. See the condemn elements. Everyone's afraid. Now I'm afraid. I have to separate you out. I don't want them coming for me.
Right. Exactly.
So she uses the word in a context, and it's recorded. A classmate of hers gets a copy of it because she shared it on Snapchat or something, and someone copied it. He holds on to it for years. And what happens is, several years later, the Black Lives Matter protests are going on around the country, and she actually posts in support and says, this is a terrible thing. I want to support my classmates and Black Lives Matter. So then this guy who she goes to school with goes on, he's been waiting for this moment. And he goes online and he posts and he says, interesting that she would say that Black Lives Matter when she herself was using the N-word not that long ago. He posts that. Now, the impact it has on this girl is that the school where she had already been accepted to college revokes her admission to the school. She was supposed to be on the cheerleading team there. She gets notified, you're not on the cheer squad anymore. So this guy who was her classmate was lying in wait for the right opportunity to just take somebody out. And he did. And he took away his classmate's ability to go to college. So, what I would say to you, and you made this point, is she an inveterate racist? Is she a neo-Nazi? Is she a Klansman? Is she some sort of... She actually got in trouble because she was voicing support for Black Lives Matter. And then this guy contrasted that with her use of that word years before. Is that an appropriate punishment? Does the punishment fit the crime? Does that make any sense? Is the way forward that we've got people acting maliciously against each other? And the reporter actually challenged the guy and we're like, look, do you stand by what you did? And he basically said, oh yeah, every day I just have to, she said it. It never would have happened if I hadn't done that. And I did a good thing and I'm proud of it. Is that the world we want to live in? I don't think so.
Yeah. I don't want to live in a world like that. Honestly. And dude, this is such a touchy topic, man. And I'm sure that people out listening, they're like, dude, crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. So, Evan, how do people get this book, man? This is obviously a very powerful tool, a guide for helping people educate themselves on what this, and you call it it's a cancel culture curse, you call it. I mean, that's such a big word. Talk to us about that, just in the title. I mean, calling it a curse. Where'd that come from?
It is. It's a curse. It's a blight on our society. It fundamentally rejiggers the way that we treat each other and the way that we operate. And to your point, there are fundamental rights that we have as Americans. One of them is free speech. There's a reason why it's the First Amendment. It's not like the 27th Amendment or the third. It is right up there up top. It is a fundamental primary right that we have. Numero uno, exactly.
Right.
And, another is due process. And we touched on this earlier in the conversation that, someone accuses you and you have an opportunity to make your case. You can go before a jury of your peers and you can be judged on facts, not prejudged based on hearsay. So also freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of assembly. We don't want to live in a society where we're all so scared to say what we think, to say it out loud, and where we're living in fear. We're tiptoeing around we're walking on eggshells. We're afraid that at any moment the mob is gonna come after us. And the other thing is, and I think that this is a really important aspect that we spend a lot of time on in the book, is it obliterates the ability of people to ever atone or to be forgiven or to apologize. So in a pre-cancel culture world, I keep going back to this silly argument, but I think that we have to, it puts a it puts something concrete that we can point to. We're not just talking theoretically, but again, back to when I insulted you because I told you the Cowboys are better than the Saints and that you're stupid. I can reflect on that and I can go back to you and say, you know what, Bradford, I was thinking about it. It was really rude of me. That's your opinion. I have an opinion. We can agree to disagree. Look, I shouldn't have called you stupid. I'm sorry. And you say, okay, let's move on. Well, in a cancel culture world, that you never get that resolution because in a cancel culture scenario, I say to you, look, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said it. I apologize. And you go, well, I don't accept your apology. You hate me. You hate people like me. And you just confirmed, you know that you're a bad person. And therefore, I'm done with you. And whatever you get, you deserve. And that's what you see play out with, and that's why it complicates the whole thing of whether or not you apologize, et cetera. So, you know, the book is a very deep dive into all these concepts. If people want to read more, and I hope they will, you can go on Amazon.com. It's there. You can go on anywhere books are sold, Barnes and Noble, et cetera. Just put in the cancel culture curse or put in Evan Nierman. You'll see the book. You could also go to cancelculture.com where you can get a lot more information on these topics. Or, you know, if you want to continue the discussion with me, I'm on Twitter now. It's at Evan Nierman. I'm happy to continue the conversation and I look forward to the opportunity to talk with you again and also all of your listeners who are out there. You know, this is important stuff. I didn't write this book for me. I wrote this book with my co-author, Mark Sachs, for the world. And because I believe that America is an amazing place, that we have to get back to treasuring the things that make us unique and special, and that we shouldn't throw away some of the rights that we have, the right to free speech and expression. And we shouldn't do that in such a rush to take each other out and get likes and shares on our social media. And we gotta, it's okay to agree to disagree, and we can have different visions, policy divisions, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we all got to live in this country together. We got to live in this world together, and we got to stop canceling each other because eventually there'll be no one left to cancel.
Right. Yeah, no doubt about it. And as you were talking about that, you know, as you were talking about, like, if you said that to me about the Saints and the Cowboys, it just hit me. I was like, even if Evan asked for my forgiveness in today's world, it wouldn't really matter because it would matter for you and me, right? Because I could say, you know, hey man, no problem. I know you didn't mean anything by it and forgive you and we move on. But the mob behind me hasn't moved on. They just keep going on it, right? And they're going to cancel you, even though I say, Evan, it's all good. No worries, man. Dude, you're my guy. It's all good.
You know what's going to happen? Here's what's going to happen. They're going to look for things that aren't there, and they're going to go, Bradford, you are ignorant. You know why?
Yes.
Because you missed it. Evan said he thinks the Cowboys are better than the Saints. It wasn't just that he happened to pull like a North Louisiana, South Louisiana thing. No. Think about it. What color are the Cowboys uniforms? They're white. What color are the Saints? What color are the Saints? That's right. Black. They're black. So, you know,
I totally missed that, Evan.
You missed
totally missed it.
So, you know, my saying, so you get on Twitter and all of a sudden that goes viral and someone goes, oh, well, it's interesting. The white guy is saying that the better team, the supreme team, are a bunch of white guys. Accident? Coincidence? I don't think so. And just like that, meaning that was not there, all of a sudden takes on a life of its own.
Wow. Dude. And that's scary. That's really scary. And you're right. That's exactly how it goes. It's exactly how it goes. Evan, man, anything else that you want to share? I want to give you full autonomy to share. You know, one of the things that for the podcast for me is as you talk about cancel culture, because I mean, you know, you're in your 40s, I'm in my 50s. At some point, we're not going to be here anymore. So the work that we do now is really laying a foundation for what will come. So, you know, if you had to say something, any message that you'd have to say to any of our young listeners out there who are tuned in right now, like, what is your intention? What's the purpose? And what do you want to leave behind as your legacy for the younger generation to follow so that they can work themselves out of this mess that we've gotten ourselves into? What would you say?
Yeah. Well, thank you for the opportunity to weigh in on that. And, you know, in the dedication part, the acknowledgments of the book, I actually have a message to my kids in there. And I got a 16-year-old boy, a 13-year-old girl. And
Yeah.
I said to them, I hope that in some small way, this book contributes to making this a kinder, more forgiving, more open society. And we've gotten ourselves in a place where there's just so much division and so much turmoil in this country.
Yeah.
And we got to find a way to make it better and incrementally. And I do believe that, just by extending a little more grace and forgiveness and respect, we can make this world better. And I just also want to recognize, I think what you do as a coach is so fundamentally important. I believe, some of the most important people in my life, I was, like you, I was an athlete. Some of the coaches that I had just, they shaped the course of my life. And even now, I'm in my mid 40s and I run a business, and guess what? I have a coach. And I think everybody out there benefits from having a coach. You need someone who is gonna provide that support, that instruction, that guidance, someone who's in your corner and has got your back. And look at the best athletes in the world. Look at the top performing business people. Pretty much all of them have a coach, and that's not by accident. That's out of a dedication to getting better. And so to all the young people who are listening, I would just say, I found the path of entrepreneurship relatively late. As I told it earlier in the podcast, I already had a couple kids and a wife and a mortgage and a dog. But it's a different world. And I didn't realize that I had so much control over my future. And to all the young people, you have a future in front of you, and it can be an amazing one. And surround yourself with the people who are going to lift you up, who are going to inspire you, who are going to have your back. Avoid the negative people out there. Avoid the energy vampires. Stay away from the cancel vulture. Surround yourself with positive people and coaches and supporters, and you can build an amazing life for yourself.
Man, I love it. Love it. Yeah, and I totally agree. And you know what, to all the young kids out there, the people that lift you up don't always look like you. That's the truth.
Great point.
That's the truth. And sometimes they do look like you, but not they don't have to look like you to lift you up. So don't get caught up in the popular narratives out there that's saying, oh, white people can't support, like they don't care about us. It's not necessarily, it's not true. You got some black people that don't care about white people. You got some white people. And why is it always black and white, Evan? Like, I don't understand. Like, I was talking to my cousin this weekend. I'm like, oh, what about it's Asians? It's Latinos? There's all kinds of people in the world, dude. In this country, it's always about black and white. And that just always bothered me. It's ridiculous. So to the young kids, I'm with Evan. Evan, man, if you ever come to Atlanta, hit me up. Let's go grab a beer. You definitely seem like the kind of guy I'd love to chop it up with, man.
I'm coming to Atlanta next week. I'm going to meet up with you when I'm there. Guaranteed.
Hit me up, man. Yeah, you definitely Louisiana connection, man. Even if you like the Cowboys, I still got love for you, man.
Oh, thank you. I actually like the Saints better. That was purely an anecdote. I was just trying to come up with it. If my family hears me saying I like the Cowboys and not the Saints, I can never go home. So
exactly.
Maybe my brothers and my parents will be cancel vultures too. I hope not.
Hey, if they could be feeding into it now. You have no idea who's feeding into this stuff, man. So I don't think any of us are exempt from it, but I think from being aware and conscious of what you're bringing to light here with the book and the education that you're providing, I think that we can all find a pathway to go forward, man. This is not going to do us any good if we don't find our way out of this paper bag that we're in. And I love the message that you share with your kids and the contribution that you're doing. I want to thank you and acknowledge you and Mark, your co-author, for putting this work out there into the world, man, and really being committed to making a difference for all of humanity. So thank you for that, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me. And I look forward to continuing the conversation and our friendship, because
Absolutely.
I'm going to see you next week for real.
Hit me up, man. You got my number.
All right.
I look forward to it.
Likewise. Thanks again for having me. It was a great opportunity to talk with you and talk to all your listeners. So thank you.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Evan. I appreciate you, man. And I will definitely have you back at some time in the future, man, and talk about how the book's doing and what else you're up to. Okay. I appreciate it, brother.
You got it.
This is Doris Brown's baby boy. We out.